Effectively wild. Effectively wild. Effectively wild.
Hello and welcome to episode 2329 of Effectively Wild, a baseball podcast from FanGraphs presented by our Patreon supporters. I am Ben Lindbergh of The Ringer, joined by Meg Rowley of FanGraphs. Hello, Meg.
Hello.
Which would you say are the most exciting prospects who have not yet been promoted, but will probably be promoted this season?
Well, it's so funny that you asked that, Ben, because I feel like there are two obvious answers to this question.
Yes.
The first is Roman Anthony of the Boston Red Sox, they're having a rough little time here, those Red Sox. They're making all of the optimistic FanGraphs writers who picked them for things, including me for the World Series win, look foolish. It's 27-31. Get it together, Boston. I'm nice to you one time.
You learned your lesson.
Yeah, never again. But Roman Anthony is perhaps the most obvious answer. Roman Anthony, who is batting .309, .441, .514 at AAA at this moment. As we record on Friday the 30th, he's a 158 WRC plus there. Walking 19% of the time, striking out 21% of the time. Seems good. That seems good. 8 home runs, 3 steals. That'll play. He's a consensus top guy, number one prospect for some. Yeah. I think number two for us at this moment as a 60 future value guy. So Roman Anthony is one answer. And then the other is the Jack Wagon himself.
Yes.
Jac Caglianone. People are like, why are you calling him the Jack Wagon? That's weird. And I didn't start it. Rooney did on the college World Series broadcast last year. So it's not me. I didn't do it, but it is funny to call someone the Jack Wagon because it assumes a level of maturity in your audience that, I don't know, they've demonstrated up until now. But
yeah, he hits a lot of jacks. It fits.
He does, man. He can really hit the ball. He's a little less well regarded than Anthony, in part because I think there is, even though he has addressed some of this stuff as our recently published Royals list would indicate, still a fair amount of there's some chase in the profile. It's can be kind of a long swing, although one that he's managed to shorten up. And he is in all likelihood a first baseman. He does have a rocket of an arm. As college baseball fans might remember, there was a time where he was a two-way player.
Even I remember that.
Even you, although you're like famously a college baseball fan now. So
well, when it comes to two-way players and also players playing through injuries and D3 DHs who are really dominant.
And so a marquee guy coming out of Florida might have been above your notice, below your notice. I don't know what direction your notice is going, but outside of your notice.
There's a special dispensation for potential two-way players. Right. Those are in my notice.
Yes. So he was at times a good pitcher, is being developed purely as a position player. Can throw quite hard, though. So you might think, well, put him in right field, put him in a corner and see what he can manage out there. But they haven't really deployed him out there all that much, in part because when he plays the outfield, quite circuitous the routes, I would describe them as. But he'll be able to be fine at first, although, first base, one of the crowded positions in Kansas City, but he can hit, and he's limited sample here, only 9 games, but has already hit 5 home runs at AAA for Kansas City. So, as that club struggles to have an offense worthy of its superlative pitching staff, funny combination of words, but a true combination. I think the Cags calls are getting louder. The calls for Cags, bring him up. Cags. I just got to say this, and I'm allowed to. I'm Italian enough to make this note. You never seen a more Italian-looking young man than Jac Caglianone. His last name, Caglianone, might have betrayed this to you, but I have to take a small amount of issue with Jac Caglianone. And it's not really his fault. But Jac, J-A-C, is not short for Jackson. It's not a uniquely spelled version of Jack as a name. No, Jac is Jeffrey Allen Caglianone. Jac Caglianone. What are we doing? I'm doing hands in Jac. I'm reaching out to you as one of your people. What are we doing? I wish that this is one of the few times that I wish that we did video, because I have never looked more Italian than I do in this exact moment. The gestures with hands, there are several of them.
Yeah. I like the Jac as a nickname, as an acronym version of Jac Caglianone, but the C in Jac, if you say his full name, it's kind of redundant, right?
Right.
If the C
it's like
in
ATM
Jac's,
machine.
Yeah, exactly. But my complaint is more about Caglianone and the pronunciation vis-a-vis the spelling, which I will never quite understand how Caglianone is spelled Caglianone. Clearly,
we are a mythic people, a people who have emerged from what is really a confederation of city-states, only recently brought together to form the nation of Italy. We are a little bit ridiculous at all times. I've never met an Italian who should take themselves seriously, at least not to the degree that some of them do. Look, one of the potential popes, as many noted, was named Pizzaballa, and that was his name. That was like his Christian name. It was on his birth certificate.
Like that.
Right, I know. But look, you do funny things with vowels when you're feeling little jaunty. The thing about Caglianone as a name is that it's jaunty. It's like you're on a Vespa, you're drinking. I am drinking a non-alcoholic Peroni as we are recording. So really, this is the perfect time to talk about Jac Caglianone. Is that spelled
Perianone?
No.
I like Caglianone. I like the name. It's just there's a mismatch here. Something has gone awry. And I don't know what the etymology is or what the origin story of the pronunciation is. It seems to me like maybe it was just that everyone kept saying Caglianone and they were like, fine.
Yes.
Like people are going to say it this way anyway, so whatever.
That's almost always the reason that ethnic whites' names are pronounced the way they are, because they were like, this is too exhausting to fight.
Right. Anyway, I am quite excited about Jac, and I think you nailed it there. It's pretty uncontroversial who are the top two prospects in baseball. Certainly on the position player side, I think there's a clear two position player prospects and a clear two pitcher prospects who are probably in the consensus top 10 overall and should arrive at some point this season, and people are impatient for them to arrive already. And Roman Anthony and Jac Caglianone are the hitters, and then Bubba Chandler and Andrew Painter are the pitchers. Yeah. And there are other top 10 guys, but they've already arrived, or at least they've made cameos. Marcelo Meyer is in Boston now, and Jordan Lawler was just sent down, but was up. But I am excited for all of them, obviously. Chandler has just been dominant.
Yeah.
He looks totally ready. Couldn't be more ready. The thing is, I'm less excited about his arrival because the cavalry is coming, but it's not really going to help prop up the Pirates that much. I mean, it'd be nice, I guess, for Paul Skeens to have some company, another young phenom in the rotation with Jared Jones out, but it's not really going to meaningfully improve the Pirates' prospects this season. And then as for Painter, who's been pitching fine in AAA, not as dominant as Chandler, but the Phillies don't need the help, really. They just, even with Nola injured, which is a rarity, they have the best rotation in baseball. In fact, Painter might be more useful in the bullpen. I mean, that's something that we often see, a starting pitcher prospect being broken in, easing into the majors in a relief role, sort of the Spencer Strider. It's an age-old strategy. And the Phillies might actually need more help in the pen than they do in the rotation.
They might need more help in the pen than they do in the rotation. Obviously, they're down Alvarado because of suspension. And it also might just line up nicely with their understandable desire to manage Painter conservatively given the injury history. And so they have tried to line up his innings such that, he started a little bit later. He didn't really, throw much in the spring. And they've done that to try to backload his available healthy innings such that when they are in October and they need reinforcement, that he will be available. That kind of load management was always part of the plan. And now, to your point, it's not as robust a group as one might hope for a team that is anticipating a long playoff run. Now, I imagine that Philly will seek reinforcement for that group, whether it's at the deadline or sooner, potentially. But it's looking a little light. Jordan Romano is not doing it really.
Yeah, it's not a bad bullpen, but it's just an embarrassment of pitching riches for the Phillies, and that's the stronger need, it seems like. So I'm a little less excited about those two arrivals, A, because the Phillies don't have as acute a need for Painter, and the Pirates, they just have too much of a need for Chandler even to help. I mean, I'm excited to see him, but really, it's still the Pirates at the end of the day. So more excited for Anthony and Caglianone. And Anthony, I guess there's some question about positional log jams and where he will play. And I think I am most excited to see Caglianone because there the need really is acute. And yes, as you said, he's been playing first base. He's perhaps better suited to be a first baseman, but the Royals have the Pasquatch over there. They have Vinny Pasquantino, and we don't want an Italian displacing another beloved Italian on this roster.
Although that happened within the country very often until basically the time that the Cincinnati Reds became a baseball team. So it's hardly unprecedented in our history.
They have been playing him in outfield corners. He's sort of been splitting time a little left, a little right, a little first. So they are grooming him to play outfield, and he doesn't have to be a great outfield defender from the get-go to help the Royals. And that's why I'm most looking forward to seeing him, because there's a real mismatch there. The Royals offense and the Royals pitching, which has been excellent. They've got great starting rotation, and that will soon be bolstered by the arrival of Rich Hill. And so what more could you need on the pitching side, really? So what you need is a bat, and a big bat, and that is what Jac's going to give you. And specifically, they need outfielders because the Royals have the least valuable outfield of any team thus far.
Really?
Yeah, I know.
Who could have anticipated that this group wouldn't be incredible?
I know. Not a total shock. So this is a sub-replacement level outfield to this point.
Yeah.
And so if Jac can just sort of stand out there and...
You're calling him Jac because you refuse to say Caglianone. You're like, no, I don't believe that's the right way to do it. The people of whatever province, I don't even think they're provinces. I don't know. I've never been to Italy. It's really embarrassing, honestly.
Oh, wow. You're not even entitled to speak about these matters. You got to go back to the homeland. Anyway, the Royals have a sub-replacement level outfield to this point, and so they could really use Jac, even if he's just getting to the routine plays and nothing more. That's adequate as long as he's hitting. The Royals have been just a tad worse at negative .8 WAR collectively from their outfielders, just behind... or ahead of, I guess, behind the Cleveland Guardians. Who could have expected the Guardians outfield to be bad? Despite Stephen Kwan's best efforts, it seemed like they had kind of conquered their outfield issues. They had at least a middle of the pack, a credible outfield last year. And despite Kwan's best efforts, still a sub-replacement level group on the whole, just a tad worse than the Rockies and the White Sox and the Angels, who were all also at replacement level or below. So have the Braves, by the way, but that probably won't last much longer now that Ronald Acuna has come back. Anyway, I really want to see Caglianone on the Royals. He's just a more intriguing prospect to me because there is a little more risk or a little less refinement, some rougher edges there. He feels like not really a Royals type player to me. Maybe that's an outdated perception because the Royals have had more power hitters in recent years. They had Jorge Soler lead the AL in home runs 6 years ago when he just beat out Mike Trout and hit 48. And then Salvi led the majors, I believe, with 48, also a couple of years after that.
Right.
But I don't really think of the Royals as a slugging team. And I guess that's because of Kaufman to a large extent. But they had decades, really, where people would talk about Steve Bye-Bye Balboni and how long it had been since the Royals had had a true power hitter. And they have Bobby Witt, who obviously hits for power, but he's just an all-around great player. He's great at everything. And just a grip it and rip it slugger like Caglianone, who is just gonna like hit some absolute tanks. I don't really think of the Royals as that kind of team. They're like more speedy and scrappy and defense and stuff. And so I'm really looking forward to Caglianone coming in.
Yeah.
He has 14 home runs in the minors this year, surpassed only by Ryan Ritter, who's a 24-year-old in AAA for the Rockies in Albuquerque, I guess. And then Shea Whitcomb, he is a 26-year-old in AAA with the Astros. So among real prospects, Caglianone is leading. And if you look at WRC Plus minimum 200 plate appearances in the minors this year, Roman Anthony is at a 158 WRC Plus. Caglianone is at 159. And then the only guys above them are a Dodgers teenage A-baller and a Padres 23-year-old A-baller, and then Brock Wilken of the Brewers, who's in Double-A, and Otto Kemp of the Phillies, who's just mashing in Triple-A, 25-year-olds. And they're like fringier prospects, like not highly ranked, undrafted, even good stories, but not the phenoms, the blue chippers that Anthony and Caglianone have been. So I really am curious to see what the adjustment period will be for Caglianone, because he is very aggressive. He is a real free swinger, and he's also trying to learn how to play outfield on the fly. So he is far from a finished product, and yet, man, he has been completely unfazed by AAA. He is just totally taken to that place and is absolutely raking there, even more so than he was before he got promoted from Double-A. And there were real questions about him because he didn't light the minors on fire last year after he was drafted. And yet this year he came in and was great in spring. And he actually, Dan Szymborski noted that he improved his ZiPS projection more than any other player in spring training because he was just so good. And there was such a small professional sample for him preceding this spring. And it looks like he's really putting it all together, which is not to say that he's not going to scuffle and look overexposed and overmatched at times when he gets to the majors. But again, the bar is not that high for him to clear in Kansas City. So I'm excited.
I talked about how like when Eric and James wrote about Cags, they were, mindful of how the outfield might go. They have margin for error though, right? Because the outfield in Kansas City cannot hit particularly well, but like Kyle Isbell's a really good center fielder. So he's going to be aided by, the other guys on the field, at least from that perspective. I do have to note, just because like it is important that people like really sit with this, that right now on the big league roster called up this year is another Royals prospect whose name is literally John Rave.
Yep.
John Rave. You gotta sit with that for a minute, It's just like this is a non-alcoholic Peroni I'm drinking, right? Yeah. I gotta say, the non-alcoholic Peroni, very good dupe for a normal Peroni. For all my I'm in my late 30s and I got to sub some of these out for non-alcoholic girlies out there. The Peroni, if you want a light lager that's a good fake, highly recommend.
Okay, good tip. All right. Well, these guys will come along at some point soon. I don't think we have reached the fretting about service time manipulation stage with these prospects, but I know that teams are impatient and fans of those teams are impatient, especially when they're contending teams and when they have holes and when they need help and reinforcements. And Anthony and Caglianone will provide them at some point, probably pretty soon.
Yeah, I think that there is urgency insofar as right now the Royals are 7 games out of first, but they are, and the Tigers are just, I think that we, You tell me if you're comfortable with this. I think that we can stop like qualifying the Tigers as a good team. Like they're not just a good team for the AL Central. I think they're just a good baseball team. I think it's a good club.
I think so.
I think it's just a good club. So they have to contend with like an actually good club at the top of their division, but they're not so far out of it that it's, impossible to imagine the top of those standings changing a couple of times. And they know what's wrong, right? They know what they need to do to improve, whether they have like the prospects to address that themselves with Cags. Yeah, maybe. Whether they have the prospects necessary to, package a couple of guys and make a trade at the deadline. A little less clear, right? Because the system isn't awesome and a lot of the good is concentrated in Caglianone, but also a lot of the good is concentrated in Caglianone, and he looks like he's approaching big league ready. With the Red Sox, I don't know, like you can make I think firmer readiness argument to a certain degree just because like Anthony's been around for longer. He was a 2022 draft guy. Cags was just drafted last summer. So, I'm not sitting here going, I can't believe they haven't called him up. But I also am looking at the Red Sox and going, I don't know, guys, you got to do something different because this is starting to get kind of bad, getting kind of dicey for you.
As we record here on Friday afternoon, the Royals are half a game out of the third wild card spot in the AL. And if they could leapfrog the Astros and climb into that spot, then I was about to say all 4 AL Central teams. There is a 5th one.
All 4 AL Central big league teams?
Yeah,
that's rude.
All 4 real ones would be in playoff position. That would be something. True. Imagine 4 AL Central teams going to October. How about that?
Yesterday, after we recorded, I recorded a podcast with my old friend Nathan Bishop, who used to be my editor at Lookout Landing, and we were talking about the Mariners, and I got to bore him with Mariners stuff, which he was excited about, so now you don't have to worry about it. But he was asking me, like, you're like a baseball media person now. How has your relationship to fandom changed? And I talked about how it like ebbed and then it kind of came back with the playoff run, and it's like there's tension there. And I did tell him, I was like, the place where I feel my fandom most acutely is actually in the satisfaction I take when the Astros lose. Like that's where it's actually at its zenith, where I'm like, there's still something in there for me. So yeah, let's explore a brave new world where all 4 Central teams go to the postseason and the Astros don't at all. Let's try it. Let's see how it feels. We won't know until we try.
Speaking of other returns, Mike Trout, he's back, about to be as we record here. Sounds like he's going to be returning on Friday. And,
nice.
That's not bad. Not a season-ending injury, as it turns out. And sure, it was initially nothing, routine, precautionary reasons, day-to-day, and ended up being a month-long absence. But you know what? I'll take it. Anything short of season-ending injury at this point with Mike Trout, I will take. So happy to have him back. Hope he stays in the lineup. Hope that his strange stats from the start of this season normalize and that the results start to match the contact quality more. And the Angels could use him because, they haven't been abysmal, which is somewhat surprising. And just mentioned how bad their outfield as a whole has been. So he helps there too. I guess this is not the year for Joe Adele, after all, which we could have said in any of the past several years. But there were still people holding out hope, and maybe even a little less so now.
Did you see that Hunter Renfroe got released?
No, big news.
People are like, why is she mentioning this? I think that we have to entertain the possibility that the man taking the field will not actually be Mike Trout. It could be Hunter Renfroe. They could be doing a switcheroony on us.
Oh, it's true. Yeah. Now that the Royals have let him go. Yeah.
Yeah. His fellow thumb. They both look like thumbs. It's fine.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's a very useful
worse things
digit.
to look like.
It's what separates us from much of the rest of the animal kingdom, right?
There you go. Right. It's really a compliment I'm paying both of them, honestly.
Yeah. Now, Ronald Acuna has come back. And he has hit the ground running. I guess not so much literally. He hasn't stolen a base yet, but he has hit. And it didn't take him long to hit. In fact, he hit the first pitch he saw for a home run. And he has close to a 200 WRC plus in his week or so back. So he is trying to send the message that he is the same old Ronald, that he can just step right into that lineup and be the MVP caliber player that he has been before. Remains to be seen, but certainly hope that that is the case. He remains one of baseball's main characters. He was missed. The Braves very much missed him. And I would say that Spencer Strider's comeback has been a little less encouraging. I'm not deeply concerned, but he has not picked up right where he left off the way that Acuna has seemed to so far. Hasn't really gone deep into games. The just unhittable strikeout stuff hasn't really been there. Of course, he came back from the more serious injury, and then he had one start, which went okay, and then he went right back on the IL with a different injury, and then he came back, and he's made a couple starts since then. And obviously, they could use those two guys at the peak of their powers or anywhere close to that, because those are among the best players in baseball. So the Braves situation is still sort of tenuous, which maybe we will get to if you're going to ask me about playoff odds a little later, so we could keep our powder dry there. But good to get a guy like Acuna back, and even better when he immediately reminds you what you were missing.
Right. Yeah. I think that you do get a little spoiled on the position player side. There are exceptions to this, certainly injuries that tend to linger or that you wonder if they're still bothering someone. But, you know, the rounding into form feels like it has the potential to happen much more quickly for a position player than for a pitcher. We're seeing this with Strider. You're seeing it a little bit like, say, with George Kirby, where it's like this stuff is there, but you're not commanding the baseball well. You're still kind of having to feel it out. So yeah, it is a very fun thing. Although I have such a high level, I have anxiety about Ronald Acuna Jr. the way that you have anxiety for Scooble, where, you know, the first day he was back, I didn't have the game on because I had to go run an errand, and I got a text from a friend that said, Acuna, LOL. And I thought to myself, there are two options here. Either he hit a home run, or it is an ironic, sad LOL because he immediately blew out a knee again. And I do think I will have a level of concern for him, maybe for the rest of his career, but certainly for the rest of this season. I want to see him steal a base as like a proof of concept, but I also don't want him to try again ever, which is ridiculous because part of what makes him a main character and so dynamic and so valuable is the combination of skills. And he's, even though he's not like blazing fast, he's a really good base runner. But I'm so afraid that he's going to ding again, and it would be so sad. So, I don't know. It's just like a complicated mesh of feelings when it comes to Ronald for me, because I'm just like, what if he gets hurt again?
Speaking about some players who have not performed as expected, though they have returned from injuries, wanted to just talk for a second about Sandy Alcantara and Luis Robert Jr., who everyone forecasted would be the big potential trade pieces available at the deadline. And right now, that appears to be very far from the case. And in fact, I think that was one of my bold predictions, that Robert and Alcantara would lead their respective teams in WAR, their start of the season teams in full season WAR. Right. Despite being traded at the deadline. Yeah. Doesn't look like that one's going to pan out. Yeah. But
I think you might find yourself on the losing end of that.
Yeah. Now, Robert, somewhat impressively to me, unimpressively, but also impressively at the same time, he is leading the majors in stolen bases despite barely getting on base, which seems like it should be a prerequisite.
Yeah.
I haven't looked what his attempt rate is, but it's got to be the highest because he is currently running a 276 OBP, which even in these years of low on-base percentages league-wide, that is far below par, though it's not far below where he was last year, which was 278. So now there's kind of a question of, is he just this kind of hitter now post-injuries? And I remember him being one of Dan Szymborski's bust picks coming into this season. Just maybe he's not actually that good anymore. He certainly hasn't been this year. So he has a 250 BABIP, and that is weird. he is still Luis Robert, and the expected weighted on base is far higher than the actual weighted on base. And so I think there's probably some ill fortune happening here. But even so, to steal 21 bags while not being on base all that often, there is something impressive about that. I guess he's trying to show off that the wheels still work. So that's good news, I guess. And I could see him being a buy low candidate if he does not right the ship before the deadline. Teams might look at the speed and might look at the differential between his results and the process, the batted ball quality, and say, yeah, this is someone we might bank on for the second half of a season if we have a hole and have a need. So I could see some reason for optimism, or at least not complete pessimism there. Whereas with Sandy Alcantara, boy, he's been bad. Now, he's been sub-replacement level even by FanGraphs WAR. If you go by Baseball Reference WAR or FanGraphs RA9 WAR, runs allowed based WAR, he's like a win and a half below replacement level, which is hard to do in 51 innings in about a third of a season. So he's just been downright bad. I mean, he has a 8.5 ERA, and even the peripherals case for him, it's still like a 5.5 FIP and expected ERA, which is also quite bad. So I guess the positive case for him would be that the stuff still seems to be pretty decent. He still throws hard. It's kind of hard to tell, like the pitch shapes and the movement and all. There's not something that immediately leaps off the page or the screen at me and says, this is why he's been bad. But it appears to be, I mean, control and command have just deserted him, which is not unheard of after Tommy John surgery, but 5 walks per 9, and he's never been the dominant elite strikeout guy that you might associate with someone who won a Cy Young Award and was good enough to deserve to. He's just been a good control guy and a good ground ball guy, and he's still getting some grounders. And it's been some bad luck, but man, it's been
not
rough.
Just that.
Yeah, and they keep running him out there. He's made 11 starts, and I guess they're hoping that he'll show enough. But at this point, he's kind of tanked his trade value already to the point where unless he just completely snaps back to Cy Young caliber form over the next couple months that we have until the deadline, which is possible, then you'd really have to be banking on some team just fixing him somehow, or him just shaking off this persistent rust. Because, I did not see this coming, both of these guys being as bad as they've been to start the season.
Yeah, I think that I thought that Sandy would be fine. And I thought there was a possibility that Luis Robert Jr. would be sort of in a bad way, but I imagined that if that were true, it would be the result of further injury, right? Because he's had stretches like where he's been dinged and whatnot. So I was like, given that there is a bit of an injury history there, I understood the tension that the White Sox front office felt, where it's like, if you know you're going to trade this guy, do you want to do it now while he's healthy? Because he's healthy now. But they didn't, all the reporting suggests that the trade packages that they were offered over the offseason were like kind of lackluster. And they're keen to stop accepting those, as we talked about with James when we did the season preview, like they weren't blown away by anything. And like they have had sort of a mixed track record in really getting good players who seem like they'll be part of the next good core out of these big deals. And he's the last guy. He's the last guy that they can move. But you can't move him like this. I mean, you can, but what kind of return are you going to get? Yeah. I think it's quite likely that there are plenty of teams out there who look at his sort of suite of peripherals, the track record. I'm not accusing him of loafing or anything, but I also can imagine that, like, if you're on that White Sox team and you have an injury history, are you like really busting it? Because like, don't you want to be healthy so you can get moved? But you got to play while you get moved too. So it's like ooh, what do you do? What path do you choose?
And he does still have that gear when he wants to or needs to. His sprint speed is pretty much undiminished, at least every season since his rookie season when it was at its peak. But he's still fast, 87th percentile sprint speed. Whether he gets moved or not, he's still moving. He can motor.
Right. And so you can imagine all of those things, and you can imagine there being interest. But you also, if you're a team that needs like a good center fielder and you think he's that guy, I think you're still trying to lowball them a little bit, right? Because it's like, what has he done that suggests that he needs to net, a couple top 100 guys? Like, not much lately. So it's a fix. And like we talked about this in the context of Sandy earlier, and I think it applies in both cases. Like, this is part of the risk with this being part of your rebuilding strategy, because you don't know. You just don't know if they're going to stay good. You don't know if they're going to stay healthy. And then what do you do? So it's it can be a rough go.
Well, I hope for better fortunes for both of them. I quite enjoyed Sandy Alcantara when he was at his best. Totally. He was a little bit of a throwback.
Yeah.
Just, got a little more contact than aces typically do these days, and was dominant, was durable, would go deep into games, and I miss that.
Yeah.
And now you just haven't wanted him to go deep into games because those games just have not gone great. Now, I did want to highlight a little bit of a bounce back since disastrous starts to the season. Remember when Emmanuel Clase and Devin Williams were just horrible to start the season?
Yeah.
And Clase, of course, had a rough postseason last year. And Devin Williams kind of did too, at least in one particular home run. And then they started the season, and these were, nails. These were the best relievers in baseball, or on the short list of best relievers in baseball over the past several seasons. And things were not going great at the start of this season, and Clase just suddenly seemed hittable, and Williams was blowing games left and right after the Yankees acquired him, and I thought that was a good move. I thought, maybe Nestor Cortez is not entirely healthy here, and you're getting this dominant reliever, and he's going to pair with Weaver, and that's going to be a great back of the bullpen. And then he performed so poorly that he actually got demoted out of that closer role for a while and was working lower leverage and just not getting save opportunities. Well, they've both bounced back to some extent. They've both been pretty darn good lately, which is not all that surprising, I guess, given their track records. Sample size is undefeated, or at least it usually wins. And often when there's a bit of a freak out over a reliever, now relievers are volatile to begin with, and a full reliever season is almost inherently sort of a small sample these days. So those results will bounce around. And then if you start slicing and dicing and looking at subsets of reliever seasons and just a week or two or a month of a reliever performance, who the heck knows? But if you just sort of look since, basically a month now, if you look since late April 26th, Emmanuel Clase has a 1.42 FIP over that span, which is the 8th best among relievers who have thrown at least 10 innings. And Devin Williams, a little less elite. He's 43rd best over that span, 2.66 FIP. But, great peripherals, great strikeout rates for both of them. That'll play. They've more or less looked like themselves. I guess Clase's not getting so many grounders over that span, but the airbender's been bending again, and he's now kind of working his way back into a higher leverage role. It was a little weird, and now it's a little less weird that they have found their footing again. I'm not saying Emmanuel Clase is Cade Smith or anything. He's not that great, but I think that they are both back to being pretty dependable late inning bullpen options.
I think you're right. I think that they are. And relievers are weird, dude. Like, sometimes they're bad and then they get better. And you're like, why? And you're like, I don't know. It's working now. It wasn't before. What?
Yeah. It's like Alexis Diaz, who was just acquired by the Dodgers from the Reds. Dominant Reds closer, who then became less dominant, but still fairly effective, and then completely lost it. And now he's going to the Dodgers. And of course, everyone's expecting them to Michael Kopech him and make him good again. I know that Kopech was actually pitching well just before the Dodgers acquired him from the White Sox. But nonetheless, when the Rays acquire a reliever, when the Dodgers acquire a reliever, everyone assumes that they will be great from that moment forward. And the Dodgers could use a dominant Diaz because their entire bullpen is on the IL, as is most of their rotation. But what else is new? They're the Dodgers.
Remember at the beginning of the offseason when people were like, how are they going to fit all of on the thing, and
Yeah.
where will they?
Yeah, turns out not to have been much of a dilemma.
Yeah.
How are they going to squeeze everyone onto that roster? Still a dilemma where the innings going to come from and how are they going to cobble together a pitching staff. But yeah, it's not that their problem has been too many healthy and effective pitchers.
And to be clear, they are in a position where they're rooting for it to become a dilemma, right? They want all of these guys back. They want them healthy and effective and throwing well. So, this isn't what they wanted, but also...
Yeah. And, speaking of luck regressing in a good way in this case and things normalizing, Devin Williams' fellow Yankees bullpen guy, Fernando Cruz, who I thought that was a great acquisition that they made. And I think we said so at the time or at the end of the offseason. And he's, in his mid-30s. Like, he only showed up a few years ago, and so he's older than you'd think. But he was totally nasty, like, when it came to bat missing in Cincinnati. And he's followed the opposite trajectory of Alexis Diaz, essentially, where Cruz, I think we could chalk it up to just terrible luck because he just had much lower FIPS than his ERA over the past couple seasons. I think, if I recall correctly, only Aaron Bummer had a bigger disparity between his ERA and FIP in the direction that you don't want a disparity if you're a pitcher. And so the Yankees just banked on, well, if he keeps striking out everyone, eventually maybe the home run per fly ball rate will normalize and the BABIP will be lower. And that's exactly what has happened. So his FIP, his peripherals actually have improved probably. I guess his xFIP is the same as it was last year, essentially. But the ERA is down 2 full runs from where it was in each of the past 2 seasons with the Reds. And so he's been an excellent back of the bullpen arm. And that almost felt like the kind of thing where it's not like teams are really fooled by FIP versus ERA anymore.
No.
Like there was a time maybe where someone could swindle another team because they weren't looking at the defense independent stats, or at least you could swindle someone in your fantasy league. But that era is long gone. And yet Cruz seemed like a case. I know that it was over 2 seasons that he had a pretty wide differential, but 2 seasons for a reliever, it's like 130 innings pitch. It's just, it's not even a full season for a starter. And so you can't really bank on that being meaningful. And thus far, at least, he has shown that it has not been. So he's been a big part of that rebuilt Yankees pitching staff. And I've got to say, like, I'm impressed by the Yankees.
Yeah.
I didn't see this coming so much after the late spring injury issues and Garrett Cole being out for the year. And here are the Yankees with the best run differential in baseball and the best base runs record by a lot, like 100 points of winning percentage. If anything, they have underperformed. They have a credible case as the best team in baseball to this point. And I thought they were going to be good even after they lost Soto, when they then had that flurry of moves and did their level best to replace Soto in the aggregate, as we all joked. That actually has worked.
Yeah.
That's worked pretty well. And you got to kind of hand it to Brian Cashman. I don't know if Yankees fans will, but he's done some strong work revamping this roster.
Do you think that they will?
No,
do you think that they'll be like, who's so smart and also so handsome is Brian Cashman? We say that all the time. We don't tell him enough, but
their patience has run out with Brian Cashman, and I get it because the Yankees have not won a World Series in a long time, and they're forced to accept the great shame of an AL champion ring, as we covered last time. But I think he's done a nice job with this roster this year. It's really exceeded my expectations because you lose Soto, and put aside the fact that Soto has not played up to expectations with the Mets thus far. Even if he were, the Yankees are doing a pretty good job of filling that hole because obviously it helps to start with Aaron Judge and just getting better and better somehow. But this is not what it was the season before Soto, when it was just Aaron Judge kind of carrying that offense to the extent that a baseball player can. He was doing it. This year, he has a supporting cast. Right. And it's Cody Bellinger, who the Yankees acquired for his salary, essentially, and not much else. And he's been good. You know, he hasn't been like prime peak young Bellinger, but he's been solidly above average with the bat while playing a bunch of different outfield positions. You know, Swiss Army knife sort of defensive plug and play guy. That's been valuable. Paul Goldschmidt, who I think a lot of people thought was done.
Yes.
Is not, evidently. At age 37, Paul Goldschmidt has a 156 WRC plus. And is that bolstered by a 399 BABIP? Yeah. And he was always a high BABIP guy in his prime because he hit the ball hard and had sneaky speeds. Remember when Paul Goldschmidt stole 32 bases one year? That happened.
I do remember that, yep.
Yeah, but, you know, that's a little high, but even the expected stats, the contact quality have really rebounded. Like, he's been good. I mean, you know, a little bit of a different shape to the offensive profile. He's kind of like morphed into more of a contact hitter at this stage. He's not hitting for that much power. He's just like a high average guy who has a bit of pop and patience. It's an interesting version of Paul Goldschmidt, but who knew that he had this left in him? And then the rest of the lineup, it's largely homegrown. Right. That's the impressive part. I mean, you have the remainder of the Soto trades, which is Trent Grisham, who is cooled off predictably, but, you know, he's still useful and a decent defender even now. But then, you know, other than just whatever's left of DJ LeMahieu, which is maybe not much at this point. So, you know, you didn't really miss him when he was gone, and you're not missing Giancarlo Stanton that much because you've put together this lineup of Jason Dominguez and Ben Rice and Anthony Volpe and Austin Wells and Oswald Peraza. And suddenly you have all these homegrown guys. I know Judge is homegrown too. You know, he's older, obviously, and much more highly paid. But this is a largely homegrown Yankees lineup. And then filling in for Cole, you have Fried, who's worked out as well as a free agent signing can to this point. And then Carlos Rodon, another Cashman free agent signing who didn't work out immediately, but is paying off now. And then Clark Schmidt and another homegrown guy in Will Warren, who's done a decent job filling in. And meanwhile, you have your usual bullpen full of like waiver claims and free talent pickups, Weaver and Mark Leiter Jr., who's been fantastic. And then Williams rounding into form, and, you know, Loizaga's back, and Tim Hill still around with the bootlegger face, etc. Like, you know, this is pretty impressive, even with Jazz Chisholm out for the past month or so, and Oswaldo Cabrera now has the fractured ankle. Like, I am surprised. I have to hand it to Cashman. Yeah. Luis Gil, of course, has been out and will be out for a while longer, and Stroman's been out, and they've really they've made it work. They've made it work.
It is, I think, pretty impressive. I would tend to agree. They have been good. And legitimately good, not, again, just by comparison. And also that division, which we thought was going to be such a knockdown drag out, just okay, you know? Yeah. And at the bottom, pretty bad, as it turns out. So
it's no AL Central.
Yeah, there you go. Wow. That's disrespectful to the Orioles, although they only have one more win than the White Sox. How about that?
I hate to say this, but if anyone is in need of reliever reinforcements and who isn't, do you know who has a 1.2 ERA with a 2.28 FIP in 15 innings in the minors this season, most of which have been compiled at AAA? Do you know who's hanging out there waiting for a call?
I don't know. I feel like I'm going to feel silly that I don't know, though. I feel like you've set me up to feel silly. Am I about to feel silly? Who is it? Tell me.
Someone might feel silly when they sign him. Craig Kimbrell. He's back, baby.
No.
He's going to be back. Someone's going to take a flyer.
Oh, my God. No.
Now, another of my bold predictions was that the Braves were going to finish, I think, did I say out of first place? I think I said out of first place, not a playoff spot, though I'd have to check.
You keep asking me, and I keep saying
I know. I'm not expecting you to
idea.
know. But I basically said that the Braves were going to shoot themselves in the foot and they were going to bring up Craig Kimbrell, and Craig Kimbrell was going to blow the games that would keep Atlanta out of the playoffs or out of first place at least.
Now it's sounding
it's all coming back to you.
Me.
Yeah. So the Braves maybe have not played well enough for Craig Kimbrell to be the thing that keeps them out. But But Craig Kimbrell, man, he's looking like Pete Kimbrell, which I'm sure he won't turn into the Jekyll Hyde. It won't be that kind of transformation when someone
Definitely
inevitably says, well, 7 other teams tried it and he made all of them feel bad about it, but it will work for us. The Tobias from Arrested Development meme. Like, this will be the time when it'll work out.
Yep.
But man, he's striking guys out. He's doing it all down there. And I think he has a deal with Atlanta where if anyone offers him a major league deal, he is able to opt out and just take that, I think. So, I mean, he has pitched well enough, and there are enough bullpens that are shorthanded. The Dodgers, they've gone down that path. They've tried the Craig Kimbrell experience. Might they want it again? Look, if they're trying Alexis Diaz, what could go wrong?
I would have no, like, wait a minute. Relax over there. What do you, look at, what do you, God, his roster photo is so funny. He's just got like hair. Oh boy. I would have a meaningful amount more confidence in Diaz. I mean, like, he's almost a decade younger than Craig Kimbrell. Mm-hmm. One would think that you could, I don't like use the expression teach an old dog new tricks, because they're not dogs, they're men. They're human men. But like, grant me the license of the expression. Like, you're likely to do that with a younger reliever who might need a little adjustment than you are with Craig Kimbrell. Come on now.
Yeah.
Do you really want friend of the pod Craig Goldstein to have more reason to complain about the Dodgers bullpen?
No, I don't.
I think you do not.
No,
I think you do not.
Someone's going to take that plunge. You know it. If he maintains a 1-ish ERA and a 2-ish FIP in AAA, there's going to be a need, and he's going to get the call. And we're going to see Craig Kimbrell again. It's just a matter of time.
I got to be careful because I might monkey's paw my way into him being a Mariner. And then how silly am I going to feel? Pretty silly. I'm going to feel pretty silly if I do that.
Well, you can teach an old pod new tricks. That's what we live by here at Effectively Wild. We're an old pod, but we try new things. We mix things up. And one thing that we've been doing this season, which is not really new, though it has new branding, is an Effectively Wild What If of the Week, which is our sponsored segment, which is sponsored, of course, by our temporary partners here at What If Sports. And as we have mentioned, we have a special landing page at whatifsports.com/effectivelywild. But last week we put out a call and said, hey, we know there must be authentic, long-time What If Sports players in the Effectively Wild audience. So if anyone wants to write in with a testimonial, a tribute, please feel free. And we heard from Michael Powell's Patreon supporter, who wrote in to say, thought you might be interested in my experience. I've been active on and off, mostly on, at What If Sports for over 20 years now. Yeah. Including a lot of Hardball Dynasty. They're older than we are. I've left a few times, but have never been able to stay away for long. The games and the community are just that engaging. I've shared Hardball Dynasty Worlds with many past Effectively Wild guests and other members of the baseball media community, which was a lot of fun and gave me opportunities to test my mettle as GM against people who think about the game for a living. I also reconnected with a childhood friend through Hardball Dynasty when he and I randomly ended up in the same world together.
That's so
also,
nice.
Yeah, I should add, I know that some people have walked away from What If Sports in the past because some of the former ownership groups didn't really put any time or effort into supporting and improving their products. But the current owners are site users who very clearly care about it. Yeah. So for those who may have tried it and left, now may be a good time to give it another chance. And now is an especially good time because you can get yourself a deal by going to whatifsports.com/effectivelywild and signing up for a first season of Hardball Dynasty or Sim League Baseball for $1. And evidently, you will be matching up with other baseball professionals and you will reconnect with long-lost friends. That last part is probably not guaranteed, but it's a possibility. All right. Thanks to Michael. And here's a what-if question. Here's a hypothetical, which comes to us from listener Mitch. This one may be unanswerable. I don't know, but we'll do our best here. Mitch says, I came up with this a little while back, joking with friends. We realized that baseball is essentially just zone defense and wondered, what would it be like if it was man defense? It obviously isn't for good reason. Perhaps we should stop there, but we won't. How would it work if a team wanted to embrace man defense? Maybe if there were a runner on and no force out, they could bring an extra fielder in to follow them, letting you tag a guy out anywhere. Maybe if baseball had developed some sort of man coverage, there'd be fewer bases, but you'd still have to run the base route. Not expecting an answer because it's a really dumb scenario, but appreciate the podcast and all the work y'all do. And you should know, if you appreciate the podcast, well, this is what we specialize in.
Yeah.
Sometimes, at least, really dumb scenarios that are maybe thought-provoking. So yeah, this will test our abilities to conceive of something other than what we know, because baseball is pretty fundamentally a zone defense game.
Yes.
So what would that even look like? So if you only watch baseball, I mean, the distinction we are drawing here, zone defense, man defense, it's, are the defenders playing in a specific area, a zone, one might even say, that doesn't really change, is not tailored to the individual. You don't have a defender assigned to a specific offensive player. They're playing in a region of the court, of the field, of the rink, of whatever it is.
Right.
And then the offensive guys can come in and attempt to bypass those defenders who are stationed there. And in a more of a man defense, well, it's, kind of what we're seeing in the NBA, right? Where it's more you're assigned to a certain player and certain players match up with others, and maybe you have a double team sort of situation, but you're not just necessarily confined to one area of the floor.
Right.
And in baseball, we have positions, and those positions are pretty rigid when it comes to defenders. And there are limits to really how far afield you can range, at least from some of those positions. A, because it's in the rules now.
Right.
And B, because you have to stay close enough to, say, a certain base in order to get over there in time. But what would this look like? What could this look like? How different would baseball be? This might actually be a situation where baseball really would be different.
Yeah.
I guess with shifting, that was more man than zone, right? I mean, it was still zone predominantly, but with shifting, it was at least tailored more to the individual than just we're playing in a certain position. Doesn't matter really who's hitting. When we were actually able to explore the studio space here and study the spray charts and say, this guy hits over here. Like, to some extent, wasn't the infield extreme overshift, wasn't that kind of man defense, more or less?
It's tricky because part of why this ends up being challenging in baseball, I mean, like, there are so many reasons. Like, it's quite a lengthy list, if we're being honest. But one of the problems is that your starting point as the hitter is fixed, right? So, like, if you have a guy at the plate and he always pulls.
Yeah.
You might adjust back when you could shift however you wanted to. You might shift. I get what you mean that it's sort of like playing man, but you're not really playing man. You're playing the ball.
That's true.
You're playing man on the ball because the guy is far away from you.
Yes.
And you don't really have an opportunity to interact with him until he's put the ball in play. And so the thing that you're defending is the baseball.
Yes.
More than it is anything else. And so, like, that part of it's different. And then if you have a guy on base, I suppose that you could, and we see teams shift their defensive alignments depending on, like, the game state, whether they're ahead or behind. If there are guys on base, you can pull everybody in, you can, play no doubles, you can do all kinds of stuff. But you are making concessions in other parts of the field, right? Potentially. Like, probabilistically, you're making the decision based on where you think the most likely trajectory of the ball is going to be. But, like, you are leaving open, and this would, as we know, drive pitchers absolutely batty, where if you are aligned such that you think you're going to be able to catch the ball because this guy always pulls and then he goes the other way, well, no one's over there and
Yeah.
this is a disaster. And then everybody yells and they say analytics are stupid and we have to have discourse. But even in that instance, like your failure is one of not playing the ball. Now, once guys are on base, I guess you could get like a little bit closer insofar as like you can position yourself such that you're trying to like be in position to get a guy who's already on base out. But it would be very challenging because you can't be like, you're not going to be like up on him, right? Like if a guy's getting a lead off the bag, you're not going to stand where he is because the opportunity to get him out is probably most likely to occur back near the bag.
Right. So that's one of the things that makes this difficult because baseball, famously, you don't have to have the ball to score. And in most other sports, you do. So you're just defending the offensive player who has the ball or the puck or whatever the implement is. Whereas in baseball, you are currently defending the ball and then the runners are doing their thing. And so in baseball, you have zone-based defense. And we even refer to defensive systems as zone-based defensive stats, UZR, DRS, etc. The other obstacle is that you're not really allowed to be an obstacle in baseball.
Yeah.
It's not a contact sport, which I appreciate about it. It does tend to lead to fewer devastating injuries, at least some kinds of injuries, but you don't have blocking, right? And there's a limit to how you can do that, of course, in every sport that does have that. You have to have some rules and some limits, and there are going to be flags on the play, and there are going to be whistles.
And more all the time, right?
Yeah.
As leagues try to course correct when they've been maybe a little cavalier about injury in the past.
Exactly. Right. However, there is such a thing as guarding someone and, boxing them out. And also in football, of course, you are supposed to block and you're supposed to tackle. And there are things you can't do and you can't grab them by the face mask and all other sorts of rules and specifications. But that is inherently part of the game, that you're just supposed to put your body in front of someone else and block them. And in baseball, if that happens, it's typically against the rules. It's some sort of obstruction or interference or whatever. So that really does limit your options here. So unless you went to full contact baseball and you did have defenders assigned, like what if some sort of blocking were allowed? And obviously we've gone in the other direction where, as you said, baseball has also followed that trajectory where we want less contact and fewer collisions. But if we reverse that and said, okay, you could actually get in a base runner's way. And if you did that, then it might make sense to assign a fielder to block the base runner, even if that would leave you with a huge hole somewhere else on the field that the ball could be hit into. Then you'd get more of a man defense situation where you just have to say, okay, we're bringing in the left fielder because the left fielder now will be blocking the guy on first and will be attempting to stop or slow down, impede the progress of the base runner on his way around the bases. And then you'd have to make an interesting decision there. How good a blocker is this guy? And how would that change the body types that you want in baseball? Because you want fielders to be mobile. You want them to be able to get on their horse, so to speak, and go and get it, track down a fly ball. But what if that guy is going to be your designated blocker also? Then do you want him to look like a defensive lineman or something? Right. So there's great. There's going to be a bit of a balance there. And you could have kind of a designated blocker, like probably, that guy's going to have that build. And then you put him in the position on the field where you can most easily hide him. I guess you stash him in left or something. And you just live with that defense because you know that there's going to be a man on much of the time. And so that guy's not actually going to be playing the field. But then how does that affect things analytically, right? And I guess it doesn't matter that much if a ball drops if the base runner cannot advance because they're blocked by the designated base blocker. And then can that blocker, does he have to be assigned to a specific runner? Or is he essentially playing zone then? Is his zone just in the base path and then he can block any runner who comes along? Like, what if the ball rolls all the way to the wall because there's no left fielder? Can that blocker, can he get in the way of the guy who was on first when that play started, and then also get in the way of the guy who's now going to be running around the bases because the ball rolled all the way to the wall in the absence of a fielder? This actually would be baseball being quite different, I think.
It would be quite different. You would have to your point, you'd have to have very different ground rules. I think it would really discombobulate guys. You'd need to like pause baseball for like a generation to get a whole new group of dudes used to having it be a contact sport, I think. Because like guys, they train their whole lives. They have this conception of it being one way, and then you're going to change it on them. No. Disaster, injury, concussion, broken legs. It would be very bad, I think.
So that's, I guess, the implementation of this that I can think of. It's not something that I would want.
You wouldn't advocate for baseball to be completely different than it is now?
I would not. I quite like it the way it is.
Baseball's good.
Yeah, we can make some tweaks. We can polish it around the edges. But on the whole, no, I wouldn't be in favor of fundamentally reimagining it at this stage.
Yeah.
You could also, like, maybe if you had to designate a specific defender to defend against a batter, like
to be like a rover.
Yeah, like only this fielder can retrieve the ball against this guy. If you did something like that, obviously it's going to dramatically increase run scoring. I don't know what everyone else is going to be doing on the field because, if you just had to say, tag, you're it. And I mean, maybe if you had each individual fielder assigned to an individual batter on the other team, that's something you could do. Again, not sure why you would, but you could.
Why would you though?
so you're,
the thing about it is, why would you?
Yeah, and I guess you'd have to do that again based on batted ball tendencies and say, okay, where's this batter most likely to hit it? Is he most likely to hit a grounder? Is he most likely to hit it in the air? Is he going to pull it? Is he going to hit it the opposite way? And then you find your fielder whose skills are best tailored to defend against that batted ball profile. And so, your number 2 hitter comes up and you have your assigned designated fielder for that guy. And maybe they'd have to be the first to touch the ball, let's say, because, they can't do it all themselves. They can't
all this procedure. I know. And it's like, gosh, it's like, notifying the refs that you're an eligible receiver as a lineman, like exhausting. You don't need so much potential for committee meetings, I guess is my point. Like, I think part of the problem, so this would not make baseball actually recognizable as another sport. Like, you wouldn't watch a game under these rules and be like, wow, baseball's just so much like football these days. I don't think that would be your takeaway, but I also think that like baseball has a hard enough time recruiting. Guys want to play other sports sometimes. And I don't know, you want to make it closer to those because it's like, then why play baseball at all,
Yeah, that is one thing that baseball has going for it over football, for instance, is that, you'll have to ride the bus in the minor leagues and you don't know if you'll actually make the majors. But it does have fewer head injuries and guaranteed contracts. I mean, there are things like
to recommend it.
Longevity. It's like Ricky Henderson's mom wanted him to play baseball, not football, because she was worried for his safety. And that turned out to be a pretty good call in his case.
Good job, Mom.
Even though football has ascended in the spotlight and baseball in a relative sense has descended, that still applies. You could potentially have a longer, healthier career and maybe make more money and also just have a better post-playing life if you have the skill to go either way. So, to make baseball more of a contact sport would strip it of that advantage. So, we've considered some of the possibilities here. And if there's anything that we haven't considered, feel free to write in. And having considered them, I'm going to say that I'm glad that baseball did not go in this direction. But there are ways one could do it. You'd have to really dramatically reimagine the sport. But it would still be recognizably baseball, I believe. And that's a question I think we've answered in the past. What are the constituent parts of baseball, like the core components that you can't do without? And really, it's the bat and the ball, and someone throwing a ball to someone else who hits it with a stick. I think
Right.
that's kind of the essence of the sport. And you would still have that. It's just that everything after that would be quite different.
Yeah, it would be so strange. And, who knows? Part of why we like the sport the way it is because that's the way it's been. And that's the version of it that we were initially exposed to. And who knows, maybe baseball, football would be our favorite thing if we had grown up with baseball, football. But we didn't. We didn't grow up with baseball, football. And I like football. So I guess I just like football and then also baseball. I don't need baseball, football. Baseball, football.
Basketball. Boo ball. I don't know what it would be called, but
what?
I don't know.
Try it again. Wait, what would
baseball blended with foosball? Maybe I don't know. What's baseball and football put together?
I don't know. Something very silly. Very silly.
Yeah, well, that's a movie idea for everyone if it hasn't already been mined for material. But even the essence of the sport has changed over the years because when baseball started, pitching wasn't important. Pitching was just, it was how you got things started. It might as well have been hitting off a tee almost at that point. And now our conception of the game has changed. Perhaps there's room for Mitch's version of the game, but probably not. Okay. All right. So before we end, did you want to do your little playoff odds quiz here? We're 2 months into the regular season, about 35% of the way through the regular season schedule.
I don't know if I was conceiving of this as a quiz,
a game,
but
whatever.
But I can make it a quiz, Ben. I can make it a quiz. I don't know if the quiz version is. I just think it's it's interesting to see who's moved the most, and me being interested in that question did inspire me to ask Sean Dolinar, our lead developer, to sort of make a tweak to the playoff odds page at FanGraphs, which it has proven valuable. So now if you take the playoff odds and you select changes as your display option, you can sort the columns by the change amount, not by the playoff odd amount.
Which welcome change, yes.
Yeah, it's a good change.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good change to changes. But I guess I'm curious who you think, this is just the make playoff odds. So you can get there by winning your division or by clinching a wild card. What team in baseball do you think has moved their playoff odds the most in a positive direction since the beginning of the season?
Ooh, okay. And this is since opening day for everyone?
Everyone. Changes since, I'm making sure that, since opening day for everyone. So it's not just inclusive of the Cubs and Dodgers results.
Okay. I don't know how much of a difference it would have made anyway. But I think, it's probably a team we were just talking about, right? The Detroit Tigers, I would imagine.
Indeed. It is indeed the Detroit Tigers. They have experienced a 48.6% increase in their odds since opening day. And they have a good bit better odds of winning the division and good odds of clinching a bye as a result of that. But most of their increase has been in the win division category rather than the clinch wildcard category. So that's very exciting for Detroit fans.
Yes.
What do you think the second best move has been?
Ooh,
positive
okay.
move?
Is it another team that we just talked about? Is it the Yankees?
It's not. They come in third, and your instincts there are good. And they're not too far off the second place team, which is the Chicago Cubs. Their odds plus 36. And it's interesting, here's an artifact of being an NL Central team. So their win division odds up dramatically. Their clinch wild card odds down.
Yeah.
And that is about being in the Central. And the NL being much better than the AL. But so they are in second place. The Yankees are in third, plus 34.2. The Phillies, just after them, plus 21.2. They're similarly big ups in terms of winning division, which will make sense when I talk about one of the big losers. But their odds of winning, of taking a wild card, have fallen.
I don't know if I would have guessed the Phillies because as good as they've been, especially lately, I expected them to be good. And so I'm not surprised by how good they've been But yeah, I guess it's more about their prospective rivals and,
Yes.
and one who hasn't been so much to this point.
Yes. And then I'll just also note to round out the top 5 in terms of gainers, we have the Cardinals. Who no one thought well of at all, including me. And they are only 3 games back of the Cubs in the Central and are plus 19.8 on the year so far.
Mm-hmm.
Then there are the laggards, Ben. Then there are the laggards. So do you want to guess the team whose odds have suffered the most since opening day?
Gonna guess the Orioles are
indeed the
featured pretty prominently.
Orioles.
Okay.
It is indeed the Orioles. And look, it has become something of a running joke at FanGraphs that the Orioles tend to not do especially well in our estimation. You know, we had them with like 45% chance of making the postseason. We thought that the Yankees would win that division. This is all before the season started. But we thought they had a decent shot at a wild card. And how the turntables have turned. We have their win division odds down to 0.1.
Oof.
And their overall playoff odds 1.3%. It is rough times in Crabland. Do they call it Crabland? They probably super don't. We're going to get emails about that. Sorry. This is not a knock on Baltimore. Beautiful city. And then they are joined by their AL East division mates, the Red Sox, who I hear have a good prospect named Roman Anthony. Maybe we should call that guy up. But they're down 37.4. And then those Braves down 37.2, which is like kind of remarkable because on the one hand, they started off so poorly, but they did have that good recent run, you know, and they got Acuna back. But yeah, things are looking kind of grim. And then we have an AL team. Another AL team? Can you guess what it is? Can you guess with the 4th worst drop?
It must be. I'm surprised that the Red Sox are that high. I don't know that I would have guessed that, but we
were very high on the Red Sox preseason. We had them second in the division, only a game and change back of the Yankees. Like we liked the Red Sox, and as a staff, we liked the Red Sox, including me. I picked them to win the World Series. I don't think that's going to happen, Ben. I think that's not going to happen now.
But they do have a positive run differential, and they have dramatically underperformed the base runs record. And I thought they'd be good too. I didn't think they were a lock or anything, but I thought given the additions of Crochet and Bregman, who of course is hurt now, and that's part of this, but he was great before he got hurt. And then the prospect reinforcements, I was a believer to some extent. So I guess maybe I would have been a little lower on them preseason than the odds, and I'd be a little higher on them now than the odds, I think. So my personal Red Sox swing would probably be a little more moderate, but I do understand because, I don't know. It's not like, well, the Yankees have been good, as we just said, and so that's a big part of that. But okay, well, another AL team, it must be the Rangers.
It is the Rangers. They are down 30.4. And and then the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks are confounding, Ben. I don't understand. What's going on? You know?
I don't know. Tell me about them.
Well, part of it is that their bullpen's pretty bad. And so that has a lot to do with it. And also, you know who has not been very good this year? Zac Gallen.
Yeah, it's true.
Rough. Corbin Burns, been better. Been pretty good lately. Been really good lately. But Gallen, oh boy, it's not good. It's just it's so odd because they can score runs. I mean, they didn't against Skeens the other day. I got to go see Skeens. Yeah. He's pretty good, you know. They did cut away.
You can confirm now, having witnessed
I have
in
confidence.
person.
Yeah. And you know how sometimes in the press box they'll put the game broadcast on so that you have it as a reference point. At one point they were cutting away in the half inning after, he had pitched. And I guess Livy Dunn was there. And Baxter, that's Camp, he was right there and he seemed like he was going to mess with her, but I don't know if he did. And then I had the thought, how much bad baseball has that lady had to watch this year? Livy Dunn has had to have watched some really bad baseball, I think.
I wonder how much Pirates baseball she watches when he's not pitching, because if she mostly watches his starts, then she's still seeing a bad team, but not that bad baseball, just purely because of her boyfriend. Now,
right. But frustrating baseball.
Frustrating, yes, absolutely.
I mean, when he won that game, the Diamondbacks lost like 10-1.
Yeah, he got some serious run support. He got all his run support all at once in that game.
Yeah, it was a sloppy, bad effort, I gotta say. I don't know what they're doing with Jordan Lawler. They sent him down, and it's like, is that better? Like, is he just not good? We have to contemplate the possibility of Jordan Lawler not being very good. But anyway, like, they just were listless, and they were making mistakes, and those mistakes cost runs, and Lawler had 2 errors, and the only run that I think they scored was like a solo shot in the 9th from Tim Tawa, and I was like, oh boy, we're in a rough way. But he got all these runs, and it was good, and I was happy for Skeens, and it had to have been thrilling for Livy Dunn because, again, he won, and they said that he had not won since like the end of April. He didn't have a win. They mean like a pitcher win. I think that the team has maybe won on days that he has started. I meant to check that and didn't, but like, that's a long time. He's so good.
Well, glad you got to see good Skeens and also him being happy, perhaps.
Shoved.
I'm sure he didn't look all that different facially, but nonetheless.
Very serious.
Yes.
Looked very, very serious.
Yeah, the Diamondbacks and Rangers, they continue to track each other, sort of.
So weird.
After having matched up in the 2023 World Series and then both being disappointing last year and missing the playoffs entirely. The Rangers by much more than the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks just barely missed, and they scored the most runs in the league and somehow still managed to miss the playoffs. And then this year, I was fairly bullish about both of them. And I guess I should have been more bearish, but the playoff odds are more bearish now than they were when the season started.
Well, and it's a weird thing too, because on the one hand, it's like, I think that the Diamondbacks are the better club. I think that. Do I think that? I think I do think that. But also, it's just really hard in the NL. Like, the NL is so stacked, you know? And the AL is not. It's not stacked. The AL is kind of bad. I mean, the Yankees are good, but like a lot of the AL is so underwhelming.
Yeah, and the Diamondbacks' 4th best offense in baseball by WRC plus, and then the Rangers 28th, and that just flummoxes me more than anything. And obviously they've shaken things up there, and they've let people go, and they've brought people in. But for them to be the 3rd worst offense in baseball behind the Rockies and the Pirates,
so confusing.
Worse offense than the White Sox. What is happening here?
This was like happening.
An offensive juggernaut 2 seasons ago, and then
happening?
Really fell back to earth last year, and now has just completely cratered. And I look at the names, and I still struggle to understand how they have been this bad.
He was the losing pitcher in his 4 prior starts. Skeens was. Guess how many earned runs he allowed in each of those starts. Those 4 starts, he started against the Cubs at home, and then he was at St. Louis, at the Mets, at Philadelphia. Guess how many earned runs in each of those starts?
I'm going to guess not more than 2 in any of them.
The only one where he gave up 3 was against the Cubs. He gave up 3 earned to the Cubs. He gave up 2 earned to the Cardinals, and an earned run each to the Phillies and the Mets. And I lost all 4 of those games. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. He won. I'm so sorry. He did win the game immediately preceding the D-backs. So they must have goofed.
You can't take any wins away from Paul Skeens here.
No, I'm sorry. He went 6 strong against the Brewers, and the team won in extras, but he wasn't the winning pitcher. I need to clarify something, because I was doing a bad job. So he was the losing pitcher of record against the Cubs, the Cardinals, and the Phillies. He was not the losing pitcher against the Mets, and he didn't get the win against the Brewers. They won, but he wasn't the winning pitcher.
Got it.
If I were Paul Skeens, I would try to buy the Pirates. I'd be like, How hard can it be, really? Like, Livy, let's go. How much influencer money you got knocking around? You got to go sell some more sweats.
Pirates fans would chip in, maybe some sort of crowdfunding situation. They'd be happy to make that happen.
It would be funny if he bought the Pirates and then traded himself. He's like, I'm out of here.
Marcus Semien is batting 173, 260, 224. That is a 42 WRC plus and 223 plate appearances.
Yeah,
Oof.
that's pretty bad.
Oof.
That's pretty bad. Indeed.
Okay. Ooh. So those are the big playoff odds movers, huh?
Yeah.
I guess, let's see. I'm looking now. Who else is in double digits? We've got...
there are other teams in double digits. The Brewers and the Pirates. The Brewers and the Pirates odds are both down 20, which is hilarious in the case of the Pirates. But that's because they went from like
something to nothing. Yeah.
To basically nothing. Brewers are down 20.5. Reds 14.7. Athletics 10.6. And then there have been a bunch of double-digit gainers. The Twins, the Padres, the Giants, the Mets, the Astros.
The Guardians.
Guardians.
Just almost all of the AL Central teams.
Yeah.
The Royals, even the Royals are slightly up, but basically not.
Been a busy first third of the season. We are officially a third of the way through.
Yeah, more. Yeah, it's like 35% just about now.
Yeah, it was a third on Memorial Day. Mm-hmm. Now it's past that because it's past Memorial Day.
It's getting real now. It's not small sample so much anymore. Individual player seasons, yes, but teams, not so much. Even a full season is not necessarily enough to gauge the true talent, but yeah, we're past the point where you can just write off struggles as saying it's early. It's about to be June. It's not early anymore. I
know. I'm about to be 39. I mean, not like tomorrow, but soon in the next month.
Yeah. I guess we're past the point of saying it's early in our lives as well.
Jesus Christ. What an end to this is like a fun episode, kind of zippy. Like we talked about guys struggling, but we talked about, the bright young men who will come up and maybe change their team's fortunes and oh, what a time. And then you're like, remember how you're closer to death than you were earlier in your life?
Well, that's on brand for us too. We just stared into the abyss for a second there, confronted our mortality. Also confronted the fact that Jackson Jobe has gone on the IL with a flexor strain, grade 1, in his right elbow. Could have been worse, but also could have been better. Could have not had a strain at all.
Chandler Simpson got options.
Oh, Chandler Simpson. That's not good for another of your bold predictions.
But I gotta say,
reminding you about your bold predictions.
I know. I feel like I know myself so much better with each episode we do.
He was going to lead the league, right? Or the majors or something.
I said he would lead the majors in stolen bases. And he is currently third. He's third in steals. He's
not out of the running, so to speak.
Yeah, extra. I am being reminded of this by the wonderful Effectively Wild stats account on Blue Sky, which everyone should check out because it will remind you as well as me what my bold predictions are. This is managed by Chris Hanel, our good friend. And he notes that Chandler Simpson is currently third in steals with 19, and he is only 2 behind the leader, and he achieved that number in just 35 games. So I was like directionally correct, but also he can't hit big league pitching right now. So they sent him down.
Yeah, he wasn't totally overmatched, like 85 WRC plus. He batted 285.
It didn't look good.
It didn't. Yeah, he had no power.
Good. No.
But like if he were a better defender, I think this would work. If he had the profile of a Rafaela or a PCA or something, like this would be sufficient. He could just be a speedster, a slap hitter, but he's not giving you the kind of elite defense that they're giving you. So that's a problem.
He's not. Yeah, it is a problem. It's a problem for him, but mostly for me. No, mostly for him. But
significantly
also
higher on base than Luis Robert Jr., so he had that going for him. Yeah, but also it'd be nice if he would walk more because if you're not going to hit for any power.
Right.
He does hit for contact. He hits the ball, but not like to the extent that Luis Ariz does. So he's, you know, you got to do a couple of the outcomes. Like if you're not going to hit homers, you know, it'd be good to draw some walks also so that you could get on base, so that you could use that speed. So yeah, the overall profile perhaps is not the best. Yeah.
Not the best.
All right. Well, we will do some stat blasting next week, presumably. We will get to the Meet a Major Leaguer segment that we teased. We have candidates all picked out. We just need to find the time, and we will. All right, that will just about do it for today and for this week. Thanks, as always, for listening. We talked last time about Jace Lavalette playing through a fracture. Well, Ryan Topp reminds us that the Brewers' William Contreras has been playing with a broken finger on his glove hand for the last month or so and catching while doing it. He was also told he wasn't going to do more damage by playing with it, that the main issue was pain management, and he's been trying to figure out how to swing a bat with it. It's probably playing a role in his down year this year, though he seems to be figuring it out. But yeah, that's even tougher for a catcher, obviously. They had to reconfigure his glove to make foul tips a little less painful. Contreras' fracture may have its origins in 2024, but catchers, they're a different breed. I remember when Martin Maldonado was playing with a broken hand and a sports hernia in 2022. Jace Lavalette is not a catcher, but he'd fit right in. Oh, and hey, happy birthday to the great John Brebbia, who turned 35 years young on Friday. You can support Effectively Wild on Patreon by going to patreon.com/effectivelywild and signing up to pledge some monthly or yearly amount to help keep the podcast going, help us stay almost ad-free, and get yourself access to some perks, as have the following 5 listeners: Reese Johns, Jack Lee, Parker Sickler, Will Morrow, and Laura Brown. Thanks to all of you. Patreon perks include access to the Effectively Wild Discord group for patrons only, monthly bonus episodes, the next of which we will be recording this weekend, playoff live streams, prioritized email answers, discounts on merch and ad-free FanGraphs memberships, and so much more. Check out all the offerings at patreon.com/effectivelywild. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can message us through the Patreon site. If not, you can contact us via email. Send your questions, comments, intro and outro themes to podcast@fangraphs.com. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Effectively Wild on iTunes and Spotify and other podcast platforms. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/effectivelywild. You can find the Effectively Wild subreddit at r/effectivelywild. And you can check the show page at FanGraphs or the episode description in your podcast app for links to the stories and stats we cited today. Thanks to Shane McKeon for his editing and production assistance. We hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we will be back to talk to you next week.
When I'm riding the bus or going for a walk, one strap on my head, then listen to people talk. I want to hear about baseball with nuance and puffy and stats. Yeah! Don't want to hear about pitcher wins or about gambling odds. Only want to hear about Mike Trout having fighting and the texture of the hair on the arm growing out of one's head. Gross! Give me Effectively Wild. Give me Effectively Wild.